So shall we start?
Ma'am, I have a question. Can you put it on Slack if you have time, sir?
You asked a question on Slack.
No. I
Huh?
want to ask the question. If you don't have time here, can you put
No, no,
it
just
on
ask the
Slack?
question first. No, no, we are not that short of time. Ask your
So, ma'am,
question.
I was just going through bound state. Here is a topic in question.
Ah,
The bound non-relativistic bound state, the scattering process of electron and positron into muon and anti-muon,
okay.
mu minus and mu plus,
Uh-huh.
and we have to create bound state
Okay.
because they can be interacting through electromagnetic interaction, right?
Yeah, okay.
So they can create a bound state. So they have discussed about it in non-relativistic means non-relativistic case.
Okay.
So I'm not able to understand it
Okay.
how they solve it.
Anyway, so today I am going to also make some comments on the propagator. If I don't have time today, definitely in the next class, we will come back to this question of bound states and what it means as you know, how you implement such a question, right? That is the real question.
Means,
Because
ma'am, I'm not able to means start the question how to tackle it.
yeah, okay. So yeah, that is a very big question. But the issue of bound states and how you deal with, suppose as I said, I talked about LEP for example. I talked about LEP where I said E plus, E minus goes to the Z bound state, right? So forget non-relativistic bound state. For it's the same thing. I mean, for example, it is exactly your question. You can even ask this, right? I don't know whether it was
Yeah,
this way.
I'm
Yeah.
asking this.
Yeah. So basically, how do you actually? So okay, maybe I'll draw a little more since I've written so much. So we have a diagram which should look like this. Okay, and of course you can have photon or you can have Z, right? But we want to focus on producing Z as a bound state. So you can see that here there is a propagator, and that's why I said we will come to propagators. I have not spent much time on propagators here in this course. So here there is a propagator. So let us take a generic propagator. So since we have not talked about propagators of spin 1 mediators, let me take the propagator for the electron. Think of any diagram where the electron, for example, E gamma goes to E gamma, where the propagator is an electron and not the photon, then we know that the propagator for this is I p slash plus m by p squared minus m squared, right? Now the problem is that if I am producing this particle as a real particle which decays, then this does not make sense, right? Because p squared will be equal to m squared and then the denominator blows up, and so this is not the way we look at it. I have actually told you in a different way, I hinted to you when we talked about the fact that I can write psi goes to and then I replaced E by E naught minus I gamma by 2, where gamma was the decay width. So you can see that here some such correction has to happen before you can talk about production and decay of real particles. Okay, I have not talked about this, okay, but you understand this sequence, right? This object over here allows for decay. This is what we talked about when we long ago talked about decay through quantum mechanics, right? And therefore you must have a portion over here which accounts, and this would have given you the Breit-Wigner shape, uh, E peaked at E naught and with the width of gamma. Okay, do you remember this? So something like that has to be done to modify the propagator, and I don't want to go to further details, but I guess with this much hint, see if you can solve it. Otherwise, I will post the details on the Slack listing. Is it okay?
Bond state cannot be handled using perturbative method, right?
No, 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 no. As I said, see, the thing is, the moment you have something which is, for example, I even showed you pictures about Higgs production and decay, right? Same thing happens there also. Obviously, I cannot put Z or electron or Higgs propagator when it is actually being produced on shell as a real particle. So in each case, I have to make this correction and that correction will reflect our understanding, physical understanding, that anything that is being produced has a finite line width, right? That's how the decay happens.
Ma'am, can we solve it by some crossing, using some crossing?
No, because nothing, crossing is for external particles, right? This is an internal particle. So that is why you can't solve it.
In any usual process, we have a propagator as virtual particle.
Yes,
right?
absolutely, yeah.
But I think in these cases of bound state,
Yes.
we will find real particle.
Exactly, that is why. So your propagator has to have a modification, and I don't want to go beyond that because that is well beyond anything that I would teach you in this course. But I am telling you how it arises. You can take a look at it and see. Otherwise, I will put up the details on Slack. It's not very hard.
Yes, ma'am. Please put up.
I will put it up on Slack. Yeah, I will put it up on Slack. Okay, sorry, I will remove LEP as well. Okay, so main question is, are there any doubts about the fact that weak interactions are parity violating, C violating, appear to be CP conserving, that the D and S and also B quarks will mix, and this mixture is important to show the ratio between pi dk and k dk, pi plus dk and k plus dk have this require u goes to S rather than u goes to D alone. So you've understood these, put all these facts, right? So they have a V minus A coupling, and then there is mixing of the quark which we have implemented in the down sector. We could have equally well implemented it in the up sector, and also I have hinted to you, and somebody is going to do it as a seminar, that CP is also ultimately violated. Okay. So this is the structure of weak interactions. I am going to set it aside, okay, and come back to the formal notion of how do you implement. So how do you write down formally a theory of interactions, okay. So I am going to review some things which I hope you have done in your field theory course. I wanted to check with Ravi, but I haven't. Ravindran is teaching, right? Who's teaching field theory? Yeah. Yeah, I wanted to check with him, but anyway, I mean, you guys can tell me. So how do you write down formally this theory? For that, I need to know some things, at least I hope you know some things from the field theory course, and I'll just first revise those parts before actually writing down for electromagnetism the Lagrangian that is of interest to me. So first, what do we know about, let us take simple, now we are going back to electrodynamics. Electron, photon, of course positron, okay, that's all. We have a theory only of electron, okay. We want to write a Lagrangian whose Euler-Lagrange equation of motion will then capture the entire theory of electrodynamics. So I am going to go a little back and forth. So far I have been able to do things by just saying here is the non-relativistic case, here is the relativistic case, and then I push it and say this is actually field theory. This is how we have been setting up Feynman rules in a very ad hoc fashion, right? Now I need to know some facts from my field theory, and the first thing I need to be able to do is to be able to write a mode expansion for these particles. So I hope you're writing, even if you have written a mode expansion for Klein-Gordon scalar fields, that's enough for me. Have you written a mode expansion for any, for example, I can write.
I have written it for scalar and Dirac.
Oh, excellent. So if I write a term which looks like this, I don't know what is. I don't know what is the, whether it is B and D dagger or whatever else, it doesn't matter. These are the creation and annihilation operators. So you see that what we kept calling psi as the solution of the Dirac equation for relativistic quantum mechanics has been promoted to a field which is defined at every space-time point, and this is the solution to a free field, right? This is the solution to the free Dirac equation, because you remember that this actually comes from, where does this come from? This counting comes from writing d4p by 2 pi power 4 delta plus, or 2 pi delta plus of p squared minus m squared, right? So this is the solution for a free Dirac field, and that is implicit in this measure that we have over here. And what does this field code for? The psi field annihilates a particle and creates an antiparticle. So that if I write psi bar, so the measure will remain the same, I am not going to write it again. This will have b dagger u bar e to the plus I p dot x plus d v bar e to the minus I p dot x. So you see that all those ad hoc statements I made about crossing, that final state particle goes to initial state antiparticle and vice versa, the whole thing is captured in this mode expansion. You can see that the minus p dot x goes to plus p dot x for particle versus antiparticle, and the same thing with the psi bar. Is this clear? And therefore this whole thing says that I have particle and antiparticle on an equal footing, so that the old Dirac interpretation that positron is the absence of the electron, I promote the electron from the C, and therefore what is left behind the hole is the presence of the positron. I no longer have that. I have a proper mode expansion where psi codes for both u and v. Okay, is this okay? So therefore psi bar creates a particle and annihilates an antiparticle. Now I don't know if you saw the mode expansion for the electromagnetic field. So the electromagnetic field is represented by the potential, vector potential A mu, okay. So you can see that unlike psi and psi bar, because they code for particle and antiparticle, which are different objects, electron and positron, A mu is a self conjugate field. So I have over here A epsilon mu, let me put the epsilon mu e to the minus I p dot x plus A dagger epsilon mu star e to the I p dot x. So what we have understood is that this epsilon, let me write it over here, this epsilon mu is called the polarization vector of the photon field. Okay. Now again we go back to what we know, I mean from the 19th century, what we know about the electromagnetic field. We know that, I mean you would have learned even in school, Brewster's angle and things like that. So polarization states of the photon, there are two polarization states and they are both transverse. I guess everyone knows this. So if the particle is moving in the z direction, so maybe I will call this k, it's just, I mean it's bookkeeping which I may not keep for long. Okay. So if I have the particle moving in the z direction, then I know that epsilon dot k, 3 vector k equal to 0, and some components of this we will map on to the 4 vector epsilon. For example, I can write very simply epsilon 1 so I have xy or yx component, and my t and z components are 0, and this is the x and y linear polarizations, and you know that the epsilon left handed and right handed are simply epsilon 1 plus or minus I epsilon 2, I think there is a root 2 for normalization and so on. So these are the old, so we make a whatever, we make a, what is it called, one-to-one correspondence with what we already know, right. And now we see that this same epsilon polarization vector turns out to be nothing but the Fourier component of the A field. So just like we identified the u and v components, spinor components of the Dirac field psi. We identify the, so just like v and u are the spinor, indicate the spinor nature of psi, epsilon mu indicates the vector nature of A. So this is something that we have to keep in mind. So we have now
What is epsilon L and L comma R?
left and right handed, no? You know that you have left circularly polarized light and right circularly polarized light, and that is simply Ex plus IEY, right? So you have two linear polarizations, Ex and Ey, and then you write them as epsilon 1 plus I epsilon 2 or epsilon 1 minus I epsilon 2 with a root 2 for normalization, and you get the left and right. So you remember this something, you send it through glucose or dextrose or something, and the light gets rotated some way or the other way, you know, all those things. So that's the left and right circular polarization of light. However, you see that there are 4 components here because the A mu field that we have, right? We have a 4 component A mu field which satisfies the Maxwell's equations, and therefore you have 4 components of epsilon mu. So we have only I should have rubbed this off, 2 physical degrees of freedom, which are the polarization states. But at present I have a 4 vector epsilon mu. So in my theory, when I write the formal theory of interactions, I should make sure that my physical photon field has only 2 degrees of freedom. Is this clear? Is this motivation clear? So I have therefore identified for you with these various components, and now let me just write down the Lagrangian, which I think you would have seen already by now, maybe for the Dirac field. So I am now going to write a Lagrangian for electrodynamics.
Can you explain more about this 2 degree of freedom?
I will come to it. We are going to say more about it. Okay, we are going to say more about it. So we are going to write a Lagrangian for electrodynamics, which incorporates the interaction between the psi field and the A field, and because now we have psi bar and A field. Okay, fine. Ask the question.
When the case we have discussed about electron and positron creates a muon and plus and muon minus.
You are
then
still there.
Our propagator is photon, right?
Yes.
So if
It need not be photon. It could be Z, right? No one said it is photon. It could be Z. Anything which has the right quantum numbers will always be allowed. Okay.
Okay.
Huh.
My question is, if we take electron and positron polarized means polarized case.
Huh.
So by the method, so we should get polarized photon, right?
That will go into your spin sums. You remember that we wrote at some point, if your electron is not looking at all spins, then you will not be doing, you will not be summing over spins, and that will take care of it in the traces. Okay. For example, you can do this yourself. You can look at a single vertex. Look at a single vertex of electron with photon. Okay, and ask the question, if the electron is left-handed in this interaction, what is the spin of the electron in the final state? Doesn't tell you anything about the photon spin, but it will tell you something about the electron spin. Okay, so I don't want to go back there, but it's, yes, you're right. Once you have these things, you have to remember that virtual photon is off shell. Only real photon must have 2 degrees of freedom. The virtual photon can have all the degrees of freedom because it's virtual. That's the whole point, right? So anyway, let me come back to this. So first of all, before we do this, I haven't yet shown you what the Lagrangians for the individual interactions look like. So I haven't told you what is the Lagrangian for the Dirac field. I haven't shown you what is the Lagrangian for the Maxwell field. I'll call it the electromagnetic field, pure electromagnetic, pure Dirac. And of course, after that I have to ask, what is the interaction Lagrangian? And have you seen these Lagrangians in the field theory class? For example, do you know that L Dirac is a function of psi, d mu psi bar, d mu psi bar, and it's a very simple Lagrangian. It is psi bar I gamma mu d mu minus m psi. Okay, so what have we done? We have written, for example, q dot, right? So this is your Lagrangian of q dot, and we don't have explicit time dependence. And this satisfies in classical mechanics an Euler-Lagrange equation of motion dl by dq or d by dt of dl by dq dot is equal to dl by dq. This is your Euler-Lagrange equation of motion. This everybody knows, right? Now, last semester, those of you who were here in the integrated PhD program would have done classical field theory, and I don't know whether the others have seen the classical field theory or not, but it doesn't matter. What happens is that now I have gone from this ordinary Lagrangian. We know that the action is L dt, and action is simply a number. It is so many times in units of h cross, and for us h cross equals 1, right? So this is only a number, and therefore what I will do is I will write a Lagrangian density so that L is equal to L d cubed x dt, and you can see now obviously why I do that, because this is now L d4x. Now this is a number, d4x is a Lorentz invariant that we have already shown, and therefore this Lagrangian density is a Lorentz invariant. If I have L dt, okay, then time dilates and therefore L contracts, and there is no meaning therefore to writing relativistically the Lagrangian. What is meaningful is only to write the Lagrangian density. Is this clear up till now? Once I have written a generalized Lagrangian density rather than a Lagrangian, okay, I will now define general coordinates, which instead of being the space-time coordinates are actually the coordinates which are the fields. So let me take any generic field. Let me take a field phi. So my q is replaced by the field phi, which is a function of x, which is the space-time variable. And for q dot, now you see that by doing this, I don't have time as a special direction or special quantity anymore. So I have nothing special between dq by dt, which is q dot, and dq by dx or dq by dy or dq by dz. So I will generalize q dot to a generalized derivative, which is d mu of phi. And of course I will not have explicit time dependence. I am not sure how many of you have seen this. Okay, everyone has seen this. I am very happy to hear this. Actually, I can't see the list of, just give me a moment. I haven't opened the list of participants. Oh, again some people are missing. Who is missing? Who is missing? Koina is missing, is it? Okay. Okay, fine. Hey, if you're not going to be in a class, or if, just let me know, okay? Just send me an email saying you're not going to be in class, because if you keep missing classes, then I'll always worry that you have a gap and you're not able to follow, okay? And if you're not able to inform me in advance, just tell me when you come back home that, send me an email saying you couldn't attend class today, okay? So is it okay up till here? So you've seen this good, I'm going to move faster then. So I guess once you write this, then you can write, if you've seen this, you can write the Euler-Lagrange equation of motion, then will be d mu of this Lagrangian density So you know this equation as well, right? Good. So now I will then go back to the Dirac equation. I think that makes my life much simpler. So I will write L Dirac is equal to psi bar I gamma mu minus m psi. So have you all seen how the Dirac equation comes out of this? Can you all work it out? Yes, no?
The video not
frozen here.
Oh. Okay, now can you hear me? Hello?
Right the time now.
Is it okay now or still not okay?
No, but actually the video freezes after some time and then again.
There seems to be some problem with the internet today. I don't know what it is.
It is showing network bandwidth is low.
Oh, I see. Oh. Just one moment, huh? Yeah. No, there is some problem. Okay, ठीक है अभी okay. There is some problem even in the morning. That's why I was late trying to. I couldn't access the internet at all. It was just so slow. I don't know what the problem is. So anyway, I will proceed. So I asked the question: can everybody derive the Dirac equation from here?
Yes, sir.
Just no.
Huh? So.
We can use Euler-Lagrange
Already.
Huh. And you've done this earlier or you did it in the field theory class?
Yeah, they did in the paper.
Okay, very good. So you can all do it in your notebooks. So you can write d mu of dl by d mu, let's take psi is equal to dl by d psi. What will you get here? You will get psi bar I gamma mu d mu plus m equal to 0. And similarly, if I write the equation for psi bar, then I will get the corresponding equation for psi. Is this clear? So you know how to do this, there is no difficulty. Have you also done the Lagrangian for Euler, for Maxwell's equation?
Yes, sir. Actually, I missed this class, this one class. So
Well, it takes 5 minutes. It didn't take a class. So I put the one below. So let's put it below. D mu A nu minus D nu A mu times D mu A nu minus D nu A mu, right? This is the Lagrangian. So what is dl by dA? What is dl by dA? Somebody tell me. Nobody? What is dl by dA alpha? Where is dA alpha here?
0.
0, very good. There is no a at all. This Lagrangian is a function of only dA and not of a alone. It's a very important quantity to remember, because this is what tells you that the electromagnetic field is massless, which we will show in a minute. Okay. And what is dl by d of d alpha a beta? So I've taken the lower one. So this is the d alpha a beta, or this is the d alpha a beta. Okay. So what happens? Let us say that, let's take the first term. There are 4 terms here, right? So I have d mu a nu into d mu a nu. So if I differentiate this term, I mean this minus 1/4 sits outside, let it just sit there. If I differentiate with respect to lower d alpha a beta, this will be delta alpha mu delta beta nu. So then I will get d alpha a beta left over from this piece, right? Similarly, you will just get minus d beta a alpha, and all the others are just permutation combination. So this will simply be f alpha beta, right? So what is your Euler-Lagrange equation? It will be d alpha of this.
I will get a factor of 2 also, right?
Yeah, you will get a factor of 2. That's what I said, you have all permutations. I didn't write all the permutations. Okay, so you will get here minus half d alpha of a beta, and of course because there is no current term, this is simply 0, right? So all you are getting, this is what we normally write. So d alpha f alpha beta is equal to 0. That you write as d alpha a beta minus d beta a alpha equal to 0. That is box a beta, and then I can interchange d alpha d beta. So d alpha a alpha is equal to 0. Now this is my gauge condition. So I get box A beta is equal to 0, but if I don't have this thing, if I have an external sources, this is my Maxwell equation, right? Is this clear? I mean,
Yes.
yeah, okay. So you can complete this calculation yourself. So now I have separately equation of motion, Lagrangian, and hence equation of motion for a free Dirac field, for a free electromagnetic field, and now I have to ask, how do I couple the two? How do I see the way the photon, which is the mediator of the electromagnetic interaction, interacts with the Dirac field or even the Klein-Gordon field? You can write just, yeah, ask. Yes, somebody had a question?
So the current term will also, so the current term we have to write in Lagrangian also?
Yes, of course, but it will come. So that's exactly the point of this whole class. I'm going to tell you how the current comes. Okay, so we keep telling that quantum field theory is nothing but special theory of relativity with some symmetries attached to it. So this is the symmetry that we are going to talk about, and we are going to see how the symmetry, which is called a gauge symmetry. Okay, maybe I shouldn't have removed this. So we are going to see how the gauge principle or the gauge symmetry or the gauge invariance leads to a specific form of the current which determines the interaction between the photon and the charged particles. So this is the whole idea of taking the technology of quantum field theory and using it to define the interactions in particle physics. I hope you see the connection between the two courses. It is possible, and I have done so far, writing all the interactions and Feynman rules without asking where it came from and how we actually write down these interactions, right? But now I am going to actually elevate this to a principle called the gauge principle, and the way it works is, suppose I say that, let me just take the Dirac equation, okay? Let me take a simple equation, okay? So I have L as a function of psi d mu psi bar d mu psi bar. So I have free Dirac equation. Now suppose I say that I change psi by some amount, which is say e to the some object psi, and this rotation is simply a u1 rotation, right? So here is my group. This is my gauge group or symmetry group, gauge group or symmetry group. Now let me make an infinitesimal transformation so that I can write this as 1 plus I alpha psi. That means delta psi is equal to I alpha psi. Now what happens to psi bar? Psi bar goes to psi bar prime, which will be, you can see I am going to do psi dagger gamma naught. Now, yeah?
I was just thinking that in the electromagnetic case, here we should assume local symmetry instead of global symmetry.
See, you are giving my lecture before I have started giving the lecture. Just wait. Okay, this is, I have not defined anything global or local. I have defined something called symmetry. Okay, so what am I going to do here now? I am just going to take this object, do dagger, and then multiply, right multiply by gamma naught. When I take dagger, I get psi dagger e to the minus I alpha, and gamma naught goes through e to the minus I alpha. So this is simply going to be psi bar e to the minus I alpha, which approximately is psi bar to 1 minus I alpha when I take the infinitesimal limit. So let me take a simple term. Let me take psi bar m psi term goes to minus m psi bar prime psi prime, which is, if you here we can do it exactly. Okay, and therefore this is, so this term is invariant under this transformation. what happens if I have the term psi bar, so there is an I, gamma mu, d mu, psi.
Hello?
Yeah,
Alpha is an operator, right?
alpha is simply right now a number. Alpha is a number. Alpha is a number. I am just rotating it by some number, right? It's some angle that I rotate it by some
We can
angle.
change the order, right?
You can change the order, yes.
We can change the order, right? And we
Yeah,
can
it's just a
write it
number,
in
right?
front of-
It's just a number, doesn't matter. It goes through gamma naught, it goes through psi, nothing more than that, okay? So now what happens when I transform psi and psi prime? So I get we can write it either in the infinitesimal or in the e to the minus I alpha gamma mu d mu e to the I alpha psi. Okay. Now your gamma mu is not going to cause any problems, but at this point you have two possibilities. Alpha is equal to constant, which means that d mu, which is d by dx mu, acts only on psi of x. The other possibility is that alpha is also a function of x, but we will come to this later. Right now we have alpha as constant. So then what happens? This becomes I psi bar e to the minus I alpha gamma mu d mu e to the I alpha d mu psi, and therefore this is I psi bar gamma mu. Is it okay? So this is invariant under this transformation. So we say that when alpha is a constant, we say that the Lagrangian has a global invariance under the transformation psi goes to psi prime. Let us look at it when alpha is, or let me write it in some more general language. So when we had psi is equal to 1 plus I alpha psi, I can write delta psi is equal to I alpha psi, delta psi bar is equal to minus I alpha psi bar. Okay. Now at this point, I always make a mistake in the sign. So let me see if in my notes I had taken plus or minus. Just one moment, I didn't look this up. Okay, fine. So actually I want to pause this here. I want to find a generic current, and therefore I want to just, because I am going to have problems with this plus and minus. So let me simplify the problem actually. Normally I would have asked you to work this out in your notebook, but since I am doing it on the board, let me simplify the problem to some Lagrangian which is a function of only phi and d mu phi, or psi and d mu phi. Let me drop the psi bar for now, because otherwise I am going to get lost in the plus and minus signs. Okay, so let me restart. I am sorry about this. Let me restart this problem. So I write only psi goes to e to the I alpha psi, which is 1 plus I alpha psi. Just to simplify, I don't want that extra term, so I am just going to simplify this piece. So I have now L goes to L prime of psi prime d mu psi prime, and so delta L can be written as dl by d psi delta psi. This is the standard, dl by d of d mu psi delta of d mu psi. So I don't want the other two terms because I am going to make a sign mistake on the board, that is all. I will put it back later. Okay, so this is a generic statement, nothing much over here. So I can write this as dl by d psi. What is delta psi? Delta psi is I alpha psi plus dl by d mu psi. Now you can see the delta of d mu psi is the same as d mu of delta psi. So I can write this as d mu of I alpha psi, which means this will be dl by d psi into I alpha psi plus dl by d. Yeah, ask. Yeah?
Why we have taken the delta inside the derivative?
Delta where here?
Like
Here in this equation, equation 1.
yes sir.
Here L is a functional of two quantities, psi and d mu psi. So any variation in L, this is the normal thing, no? If
No,
ah.
What I mean is you write as delta.
So when I change psi by sub, see, psi and d mu psi are independent quantities, right? That's what the Lagrangian q dot are independent variables, right?
Yeah.
So the L can change either through a variation in psi or through a variation in d mu psi. And so the total variation in L is a combination of the two.
That I understand.
Huh.
What I am asking is the change in derivative you are writing as it as a derivative of change in psi.
Yes, but that's obvious, right?
Just to commute.
Why
Yeah.
That is what I am asking.
You can actually do it by.
Yeah, but that's just maths. I mean, they just commute. Okay.
It is
Fine.
actually, I think, such a small change that you cannot differentiate between derivative
No,
of.
you can
Yeah.
actually show it mathematically.
Yeah, you can actually show it, but that's what delta. See, I mean, the whole d mu. What is d mu itself, right? D mu is the limit. I mean, any derivative is the limit epsilon going to 0 of f of x plus delta minus f of x. Sorry, not delta minus delta by delta, right? So that's the same as some small change delta. There is no difference between the two. So obviously they will commute. Okay. So what was the writing? Yeah. Is that okay? So this is the question, right? How you can interchange delta and d mu? You can always interchange delta and d mu, right? So where was I? So the first term remains the first term. Now the second term, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to write it as I alpha. I don't know whether I want to keep the I alpha psi. It doesn't matter. Okay, you can see that I've written it like this. I've taken the d mu out over here so that it acts on both terms, and then I subtract a term where the d mu, see this is two terms, right? This is one term and this is two terms, right? So now I have d mu, maybe I'll put it here. So I have first term d mu of second term. I'm writing it as d mu of first term times second term minus, it will be second term times d mu of first term, right? So it will be d mu of, is this clear? Is the algebra clear? It's just, it's a mathematical trick actually. Okay, this is okay?
No, you have placed wrong bracket.
Oh, sorry. So obviously, yeah. Sorry. Thank you. The whole idea was to change the bracket. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to combine the first and last terms. Does everyone understand why? What is the first term? So first term is 0, very good, okay. First term is 0, this is 0, right? This is the Euler-Lagrange equation. It has to be 0. So therefore this is equal to d mu of, now you see what I have done. Okay, actually maybe this is some alpha has to be there. I don't know whether it's written as I or minus I. That's why I didn't want to mix it up. That's why I dropped the psi bar term You can please bring it back with the psi bar term and get the proper J mu. Right now this is some J mu. This is J mu say for the Klein-Gordon field which is only phi and d mu phi. I have not specified that this is for the Dirac field. This is a general thing when I have only one term that is here, okay. So you can see that I have alpha times some d mu of some J mu. Okay, is this clear? I have got a J mu field and maybe now I should write the correct thing down. Yeah, so the J mu is written as minus I dl by d. So yeah, so this is correct. So minus alpha. So J mu is written as minus I dl by d mu psi. This is just definition, okay? I am just checking my notes. Okay. Yeah. So what it tells you is that therefore I come back over here. When alpha is constant and if this Lagrangian is conserved, it means that, so if alpha is equal to constant and L is conserved, this means delta L equal to 0, right? This whole thing is delta L. This I am computing as delta L, right? So delta L is 0, alpha is not 0, which means that d mu j mu equal to 0 implies d mu j mu equal to 0, or there exists a conserved, I hope you can see the bottom of the board, there exists a conserved current which is defined like this, which you will generalize of course with the psi bar. Okay, I will get that term also for you. Is this clear? So if I have a global invariance, if my Lagrangian is invariant under a global invariant, what does global mean? Alpha is equal to, yeah, ask. Yes?
Shouldn't there be a psi also in the J?
Psi where?
Because I mean we can take alpha out and then there should be a psi.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, psi. Thank you. Yeah, it cannot hang like that. By the way, you know the answer, right? You know that J is psi bar gamma mu psi, right? For the Dirac equation. So what happens is that both the terms give you the same piece. So there will be a psi bar gamma mu psi coming from. Okay, let me just how hard. When I go back to writing psi d mu psi bar d mu psi bar, you will get two more terms which will be with the variation with respect to psi bar and d mu psi bar, and that will be the opposite of this. It will be psi bar times d mu of dl by d mu psi bar, and that will also give you psi bar gamma mu psi. So please complete this. Both the terms will give you the same thing for the Dirac equation. Please try it for the Klein-Gordon field. The two will not be exactly the same. You know what you will get. You remember the Klein-Gordon current, d mu phi star phi minus phi star d mu phi, right? So the two terms that you will get from the two pieces of phi and phi star will have a relative minus sign. Here you just get psi bar gamma mu psi from both. Is it clear? Sorry, I didn't want to do, you can see that if I have to put two more terms, it wouldn't have fitted, that's why I dropped it. But you have to get you can see this, what is dl by d mu psi? So let me write down somewhere over here. Let me write down here, L Dirac is equal to psi bar I gamma mu d mu minus m psi. So what is dl by d mu psi? So when I do d mu psi, so dl by d mu psi is equal to I gamma mu psi bar. So that's how you get minus I, sorry, it should have been psi bar times gamma mu acting on this side, right? So I'll get therefore minus I psi bar gamma mu psi, and we know this is the electromagnetic current for the Dirac field. We've already seen this when we did the phenomenology. Yeah, ask.
This board is too blurred for me. Is it for everyone or just for me?
Which part you can't see?
It is fine.
Which part you can't see? I will say it again. Vaibhav, which part you can't see? You saw this? So I have actually told you, I'm making a few extra remarks. I have not derived anything in the meanwhile. All I am saying is that I dropped two terms, I dropped the psi bar and d mu psi bar term simply because it won't fit on this. See, by the way, I am writing very big on this board. I normally would not write so big if people were sitting in front of me, okay. So I am writing it very big, so I realize that I won't be able to fit the other two terms. So I just dropped psi bar and d mu psi bar term. So I am simply making some remarks. So as I don't know who pointed out, I had dropped the psi term here. So this dl by d mu psi for the Dirac field gives you simply psi bar gamma mu. So that I get psi bar gamma mu psi, which we know is the usual electromagnetic current for the Dirac field. Okay, is this clear? And if you repeat the same thing with the Klein-Gordon field, please do it. You will see that you will get the usual Klein-Gordon current which interacts with the electromagnetic field, which we had already got from phenomenology. Okay, we had already derived this long ago. So we not only have a conserved current, we know that J mu is a conserved current. So maybe I will write it somewhere. We know that J mu is a conserved current. Not only we know it's a conserved current, we have the form of J mu. We have its C and P properties. I mean, everything is there, right? Is it clear? So let me write, where will I write? I can take this off maybe. I will write J. So I say J mu is equal to, and by the way, this whether E is there or not is whether it's the density or whether it's the charge density, right? Psi bar gamma mu psi for the Dirac field, and we know that this therefore satisfies d mu j mu equal to 0 here if delta L equal to 0, and this gives you the fact that this is d0 rho plus del dot j equal to 0, and then if I integrate this over d cubed x, then I get d by dt of integral rho d cubed x, and then this surface term just goes to 0 at infinity, so that I get q is equal to, okay. So the conserved current leads to a charge conservation, and that's exactly what we've always known. There's nothing new. You realize this, I am now writing this in a very formal sense, but it is giving you back our old known results, okay. It's just that the style of doing things, I will be able to extend this to the weak interactions. Is this clear? That I am not doing anything new over here, I am just getting back our old results in the following fashion. Now I am going to do something new. All this time I said that if alpha is a constant and if the Lagrangian is invariant under the transformation, under that global transformation, meaning that parameter is a constant, then I have a conserved current. What happens if I do not have alpha as a constant, but alpha is actually a function of x? Now I think the simpler way to do it will be to first write it down for the Dirac equation, and then we will write it down in this formal sense and ask what are the terms that are coming up or not coming up. So now let me just write down L Dirac, and then I write psi bar I gamma mu d mu minus m psi, okay. And now I ask what happens, psi goes to e to the I alpha psi, psi bar goes to psi bar e to the minus I alpha, but now this is called a local transformation because at every space-time point I am changing alpha by a different amount. So think of rotating in different parts of space by different amount, alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha 3, alpha 4, that gives me a local transformation. Now it's a very peculiar thing. Why do I expect an invariance under this? But it turns out that by demanding such a local invariance, that is the Lagrangian remaining invariant under such a local transformation, it turns out that you will actually be able to derive the nature of the interaction current between the electromagnetic field and the Dirac field, and that is what we are going to see now. So what is it?
Why do we do local geometry?
That's what I'm saying. It's just a mystery. You apply it and you get, hey presto, you get the nature of the current. Now that that current works and you know that it works for the electromagnetic field, I am going to use the same principle to do the same thing for the weak interaction and find a weak current, which also gives you the same interaction now between the electrons and the weak interaction particles W and Z. Okay, so this is simply a prescription. So please understand this very clearly. Yes, that's what I said. I have elevated this to a principle and I have called it the gauge principle. And I am saying that I take this theory, I apply some symmetry principle. For example, I have a U1 transformation here. The global invariance under that transformation will give me a conserved current, and the local invariance under that transformation will tell me how that current couples to the whatever mediating field. So if it's electromagnetism, the coupling to the electromagnetic field; if it is weak interaction, coupling to the W field; if it's strong interaction, coupling to the gluon field. Every interaction is exactly by applying the same principle using a different symmetry group. So in fact, might as well write it down. What happens is that for strong interactions, the symmetry group is SU3. So you will see it once and for all. For weak interactions, the symmetry group is SU2. It's called SU2L for left-handed, and for electromagnetic interactions or some, it's not quite electromagnetic interactions, some other interaction which will eventually give us electromagnetic interaction is called U1 of hypercharge. You remember I mentioned hypercharge when we were looking at quark spectroscopy. That is why I introduced hypercharge at that time. You remember that why was all those quantum numbers which was beyond charge. You remember that Q was equal to I3 plus Y by 2. Yes.
Can you repeat previous line? I am not.
I said that ultimately we are going to see that our standard model of particle physics, this is called standard model of particle physics, it's called SM, okay, will have the same principle that I am going to teach you today for electrodynamics. We are going to generalize it. So I have just rotated it by a small e to the I alpha here is equal to e to the I alpha psi. So this is an element of the U1 group. Then if I use the SU2 left-handed, I will explain what left-handed means, but if I use an SU2 gauge group and apply the same local and global transformations, then I will get the correct interaction of electrons or quarks or whatever with the W fields, and if I apply the SU3 symmetry, I will get the interaction of the quarks with the gluon field. Is this clear? So all I am saying is that it's like a template. I am going to use it again and again in exactly the same way, each time applying a different group. So here psi goes to psi prime is equal to some U1 group times psi. Here it will be, next will be SU2 group and next will be SU3 group. Okay, is this clear? So there is a certain pattern involved, and it's a technique, so that applying this principle gives you an interaction, and that interaction gives you the correct agreement with the observed universe. That's it. Okay. Shall I proceed? Now that I have told you what it is that we are going to set up. So I come back to what is it that we are going to do, go back to electrodynamics and ask now if alpha is a function of x. So we will now quickly repeat all these things. What do we have? Let's look at the term psi bar m psi. I think goes to psi bar prime. Everybody can see that it doesn't matter whether alpha is global or local, the mass term is not going to bother you, right? So that is going to remain invariant. So let us look at the more interesting thing, which is I gamma mu d mu psi, and you can see immediately what happens. So this will be psi bar e to the minus I alpha. So I'll bring out gamma mu. Now d mu will act on both the terms because this is e to the I alpha and alpha is a function of x. So that is I psi bar e to the minus I alpha gamma mu. I will have two terms. I will have, let's write e to the I alpha d mu psi plus I d mu alpha e to the I alpha psi. So now what have I done? D mu acts on this term and d mu acts on this term. So I will have two terms now. So you will see that I will have let's write them down. So e to the I alpha and e to the minus I, because sorry, I should have put the brackets. Now this is an e to the I alpha and e to the minus I alpha, so that goes away. So I have psi bar gamma mu d mu psi, that is the first term. So that is the same as this, but I will have one extra term, I into I is minus 1 psi bar gamma mu psi into d mu alpha. So this is the extra piece that I have. So you can see that when I have a local, under a local U1 transformation, I have an extra piece, and therefore this Lagrangian is not invariant under this transformation. Now what I am going to do is I am going to ask ultimately this free particle Dirac field is going to interact with my electromagnetic field. Now please remember, Lagrangian is a function of psi and d mu psi. Just in the interest of saving space, I have not put that, and in fact I think you can see a little more. Can you see up till here in the board? Okay.
You can go further.
Oh really? Oh very good. Okay, very good. Okay, good. That gives me a little more space. So what I am going to do is that I want to ask, okay, so my Lagrangian which had psi and psi bar was not invariant under this transformation, but is there some way that I can make a transformation such that this A field will compensate this particular term and give me an invariant Lagrangian? So I will write down the answer. This is the same d mu alpha where psi goes to psi prime, and let me make it very clear that this is a local transformation, psi is a function of x. Now let us see what happens. We have to worry about two terms. We have to worry about the electromagnetic fields Lagrangian, which is f mu nu, but I will come to that later. Suppose I say that I write down, suppose, and by the way I am doing it this way because you can write it formally and then show what the interaction should be, but I feel that on the online class it's easier to write down the answer and then show the consistency. Okay, suppose I write L is psi bar I gamma mu d mu psi minus j mu a mu, where j mu was minus I minus E psi bar gamma mu psi. So we have seen the transformation of this term. Sorry, what have I written? Okay, so we have seen the transformation of this term has an extra piece. Psi bar m psi was invariant, so we don't have to worry about it. So now let us look at the transformation of j mu a mu. So what happens to j mu a mu? Goes to j mu prime a mu prime, which is minus E psi bar prime gamma mu psi prime a mu prime, that is minus E. So you can see here, is it clear that because this is gamma mu, the e to the minus I alpha and e to the plus I alpha will simply cancel. So this is psi bar gamma mu psi, and a mu prime was a mu. I have been little careless, so maybe I will write j mu a mu just to show you the matching. So this is the first term, is simply the usual.
That is 1 by E, right?
This is 1 by E, yes, 1 by E. So the first term is simply the usual j dot A interaction, right? And the second term is plus psi bar gamma mu psi, the E has to cancel. Can you see that? Okay, so obviously I have an overall minus sign here which should have been, so I made a mistake in the overall sign. Yeah, because there is a, first of all this I goes in because I squared was minus 1. So this is a minus psi bar gamma mu psi d mu alpha, and there should have been a plus psi bar gamma mu psi d mu alpha. So probably I have got a sign wrong here, and this is the correct answer. So what I get is that I have 3 terms in the Lagrangian. This term, term 1 gives you 2 pieces. term 2 is invariant. Term 3 gives you two pieces, and one piece of this and one piece of this cancel each other, and therefore Lagrangian is now locally invariant. Is this clear? Is this clear? So what I have done is this. I have said that simultaneously with transforming psi, I transform the A mu field with the same alpha, okay, but its derivative alpha, and then I find that this Lagrangian is locally invariant. Now, you will remember that I discussed this gauge transformation earlier with you. I said if A mu goes to A mu prime is equal to A mu minus d mu lambda, provided box lambda equal to 0, then we showed that the electric and magnetic fields are not altered by this change. In the formal language that we are choosing to use here, this translates to L electromagnetic, which is minus 1/4 F mu nu goes to minus 1/4 F prime mu nu F prime mu nu, and please you can just do it as homework, it's obvious, okay, is equal to L. So here F mu nu prime contains A mu prime, okay, and just you will find that all these things will simply go away, and this Lagrangian is invariant under this transformation. So that means that this change is actually the gauge transformation. That is why A mu is called the gauge field, and with this gauge transformation the electromagnetic part of the Lagrangian remains invariant. The non-electromagnetic part of the Lagrangian, the extra piece of the interaction term cancels with the extra piece of the Dirac term. So now let me write down all the terms so that you can see exactly what is happening. Yeah, ask the question.
So ma'am, I mean, we have not established that box of alpha should be 0.
I will come to that. I will make a remark about that. So this is psi bar I gamma mu d mu minus m psi minus 1/4 F mu nu minus j dot a. This minus j dot a plus j dot a will depend on whether you define j with minus c or plus c. So let's not worry about the overall sign. So what happens when L goes to L prime? Okay, this has an extra term, this has an extra term which cancel each other. This remains invariant, this remains invariant, and therefore the whole Lagrangian remains invariant. Okay, that means that if you wanted to find an interaction between the two which leaves this Lagrangian invariant under the local transformation, then you jolly well have to use this form of the coupling. Okay. Now just to make a remark, I thought I had made the remarks already when we talked about gauge invariance. We talked about, okay, maybe I'll write that part again. This is an aside. A mu goes to A mu prime minus d mu lambda, and we wanted box lambda to be 0, and so these were the two conditions that we had to convert the 4 degrees of freedom of the photon field to the 2 degrees of freedom. Do you remember? We discussed that in some earlier class, and that doesn't change. So everything here comes back to the same thing, but as I said, in a much more formal language. So now what are we associating this, this whole thing with? We are associating it with some gauge transformation, a simultaneous gauge transformation of the psi and the A mu field, and therefore this quantity which made your gauge choice consistent still remains consistent. Please understand that we get back the Dirac equation, we get back the electromagnetic current psi bar gamma mu psi, we have done nothing new. We have just put it in a little bit different, more formal language. The physics as usual is simply dictated by observation, right? Is
No, so, hello?
Yeah, ask the question.
So I was saying that we have defined alpha without any condition on it through the local symmetry, right?
But then
for this whole whole formalism to work, we have to define that box alpha should be 0.
But that comes from the gauge condition. That is not going to change, right? See, your solution for your electromagnetic field, which is coming from here, right?
Like,
See, there is no new physics here. What required box alpha equal to 0? Box lambda equal to 0 came from this condition. So we have box d mu a mu prime is equal to a mu minus d mu lambda alpha whatever, which is d mu a mu minus d mu which is box lambda, right? Now if this has to remain 0,
this has to remain 0.
yeah, so therefore box lambda has to be 0.
No,
So
but the thing is, like you have defined a mu dash, right? From the left.
yes, yeah, yes.
To cancel off the extra set.
This is always required because if this has to give you the genuine electromagnetic field, that always is true. Yes,
So that is what I was.
that's it. Oh yeah, sure. So all those conditions will come back here. All I'm saying is that we are now reinterpreting it differently. We just interpreted we started out by saying that we have a gauge choice, so we use a gauge condition, and then we say that by changing A to A prime by some derivative quantities, E and B fields remain the same. E and B fields remain the same is the same as saying that this Lagrangian with F or F prime gives the same result, which are the same physically observable E and B fields, but now we call that a gauge principle and we transform A and psi in this symmetric fashion. Psi transforms according to alpha and A transforms according to d mu alpha, and it's coming from the old understanding. There is nothing new.
So alpha cannot be any
No, alpha has to satisfy box alpha equal to 0, and that whole argument, that whole derivation, everything remains the same. I am not going to go over it again. I am only using this gauge principle to see how such a current can be written. So this current is, or this coupling, J dot A coupling is called a minimal coupling because it's a minimal interaction which is gauge invariant. Obviously I can write many more terms which will be gauge invariant, but this is the simplest term I can write, which leaves the Lagrangian invariant under such a local gauge transformation. Is it clear? Okay. Now let me see if I can go back and write it in a little formal fashion. Let me see what I can do. Yeah.
Ma'am,
Yeah. Ask.
ma'am, in our derived field, we can get another type of current that is called axial current that's created by e to the power I
Yes.
alpha
But
gamma phi.
but you wait. You wait.
How this current is different from our this?
See, we are doing electromagnetism. Wait until we come to weak interactions, right? Only in weak interactions you have axial current, right? In electromagnetic interactions, I have only vector current. That's why do you think I always use electromagnetism as the simplest starting point? It is the simplest, okay? Okay, so now what I will do is that I will now introduce a new notation. I will write L is equal to psi bar I gamma mu d mu minus m psi, where d mu is d mu minus I. See, by the way, you have seen all this before. You never thought of it as a elevated gauge principle. What is this that you see? If I multiply by I everywhere, it says I d mu is P mu plus E A mu. But we know this forever, right? You knew this in your BSc or MSc. You know that any interaction with some electromagnetic field just involves replacement of P by P plus EA by C. Now we have C is equal to 1 for us, okay? Do you understand? So this thing which I will now call a covariant derivative, it's called a covariant derivative because it is a covariant derivative, but it is now defined as this. And all we will have to do is that for every type of interaction, we will have to define a different covariant derivative. And what is the advantage of writing such a covariant derivative? It comes in the fact that if psi transforms, how does psi transform? Psi prime is equal to e to the I alpha psi is equal to 1 plus I alpha psi. So delta psi is equal to I alpha psi. You will find that delta of d mu psi will transform exactly like psi. This is the greatest advantage of writing d, and you can just see this by writing this term. So what is d mu? D mu minus IE A mu now. I don't remember, I rubbed off the board. What were all those terms? Just get me the plus and minus signs. This was plus psi, no? So this is d mu of. So I'm again interchanging these two. This was I plus I alpha psi. Okay, minus IE. So I have delta A mu psi minus IE A mu delta psi. That is d mu I alpha psi minus, sorry, let me now expand this in brackets. So this d mu now, because alpha is a local quantity, this is I alpha d mu psi plus I d mu alpha psi minus IE. What is delta A mu? Minus 1 by E d mu alpha minus 1 by E d mu alpha psi minus IE A mu I alpha psi. So this is I alpha d mu psi plus I d mu alpha psi. Now this is minus into minus is plus I d mu alpha psi. Have I got a mistake in the sign? That's what I always worry about. Yeah, these two should have cancelled. So let me keep going. So this is minus into plus is plus E alpha A mu psi. Just give me one moment and let me try. Can anyone figure out why these two didn't cancel? D mu is this, I d mu psi minus IE delta A mu, yes. So delta A mu was minus, yes, that's also, sorry, one moment, let me see what I did in my notes. Okay, that is because I have made a mistake here. This is d mu plus IE mu. So again, let me get this right. Let me just substitute this. So we will get our definition of J mu once and for all, okay. So this will be I gamma mu d mu minus m psi. Sorry about this, let me get this right. So there will be a I into I is minus E psi bar gamma mu psi A mu. So that means if J is minus, this is plus J dot A when J is minus E psi bar gamma mu psi. Okay, fine. So this sign is when J is minus E, and we had also got plus J dot A, that's correct. So this will all be plus plus, so this will be plus plus, so this will be minus and this will be minus, and these two will cancel and I will get these two terms. So this is alpha I alpha d mu plus I E A mu psi, which is I alpha d mu psi. So let me write the answer on the top is I alpha d mu psi. Did you see this? So we will use this property of the covariant derivative. It has this very nice property, okay, and therefore when you do variations of this Lagrangian, you can see that the variation of psi and the variation of d mu are identical, and that's how this cancellation occurs. Is it clear? So this is a property that we will make use of again and again, okay, this property of the covariant derivative. So what we have now seen is so many things. Let us go one by one. When I make a global transformation and alpha is a constant, I have a conserved current J. If I use this minimal coupling J dot A and couple the Dirac field with the electromagnetic field, then this Lagrangian is invariant locally under the combined transformation of both psi and A when alpha is a function of x. And then I will define I will replace my ordinary derivative by a covariant derivative and say that therefore I can simply write, so I will write this equation neatly so that you can see it. I have now my full Lagrangian all the interaction term is sitting here. So you see that I don't have to write the Lagrangian as Lagrangian, Dirac-Lagrangian, electromagnetic Lagrangian plus interaction term. The interaction term is simply subsumed into this by replacing the ordinary derivative by the covariant derivative. And we will see that I should be able to do this for every possible interaction that I have, and this whatever guiding principle will give me the correct interactions for the particles interacting with any of the mediators, strong, weak or electromagnetic. So is the principle of gauge invariance clear? Okay. There was one more part, but I think I don't want to go over that. Okay, you can do this yourself. You can show that the commutator of d mu d nu it defines f mu nu. So you can actually ask this question. So what have you done? You have replaced the ordinary derivative by the covariant derivative, which includes the electromagnetic field. When you have a weak interaction, it will include the, let us in fact write one such piece. Suppose I have d mu for the some weak interaction, I don't know what it is, it will be d mu plus I some weak coupling times some weak field, right. So now I have defined these weak fields, and what is the relationship between the Lagrangian of, this is the kinetic energy term, this is the kinetic energy term for that field, right, for that mediator field. The way you get it is by writing the commutator of d mu d nu, and that will be equal to, there's maybe a plus or minus sign, okay. So this also gives you the defining interaction which tells you what is the kinetic energy of those fields. Is it clear? So I am a little bit short of time, you can work this out, it's very trivial. So what you have to do is, this is an operator relation, so you act both sides on some field, okay, and expand it out and you will get this answer, okay. It's just another few steps. So is this whole thing clear for electromagnetic field? Please understand that in this class we have not said anything new. I have just written everything in a different language. I have written Lagrangian, I have got an Euler-Lagrange equation of motion, and when they are free fields I have shown that for the Dirac case it reduces to the Dirac equation, for the electromagnetic case it gives you the Maxwell's equation. And you can also check now, by the way, that once I have put back this d mu covariant derivative term, please redo the Maxwell's equations. You will see that this gives you there's an a mu field over here, right, there's an a mu field over here, and that will give you back the correct box a mu is equal to j mu, okay. Is it clear? So that you will also get back your correct Maxwell's equations over here, and that also defines the interaction term. I want to make one remark before I stop, and that remark is that there are other terms, maybe actually I want to make two remarks before I stop. There is another, okay, maybe before I make the remarks I will say a few words. So you can identify this as p slash minus m, right. So what I would now want to make analogy with, and this, as I said, formally you will learn in your field theory course, is that this is the square term, this is a quadratic term in the psi field. The inverse of this quantity turns out to be the propagator for the psi field. If I have this as a psi field, we know the propagator is I by p slash minus m, which is I into p slash plus m by p squared minus m squared, okay. Now this J dot A, let me write it down properly. That's why in fact I started writing down. So we have minus E psi bar gamma mu psi A mu. So this tells you the interaction between psi bar and A mu field. So this is psi bar and A mu field, and it tells you that this interaction is the overall factors you will have to see, okay. So you can see that whatever terms are there in the Lagrangian, right. So the quadratic field gives you the propagator. The quadratic field here will also give you the propagator, but it's harder to see, okay. The quantity which has an interaction between psi and A fields, the coefficient of that gives you the interaction vertex, okay. So if I had some other vertex which was say psi bar psi A, then that will give you the interaction between psi bar and two A fields. Is this clear? So that is how we are going to get the Feynman rules when you actually write down the Lagrangian in field theory and then look at it will be the Fourier components of all these terms. You can see that because this is X space and this is the P space. So the Fourier transforms of all these quantities are going to give you the various terms. So I want you to identify quadratic as propagator, linear terms cannot appear, and whatever cubic, quartic, etc. are all interaction terms. Now you can see that, let us look at dimension. So if you write down the mode expansion, you will see that psi has a dimension of 3 by 2. So you can see that 3 by 2 plus 3 by 2 is 3, m is 1, 4, and the Lagrangian density has to have dimension 4. Why? Because we know that integral L d4x is a number. d4x has mass dimension minus 4, so L must have mass dimension plus 4. So since this is 1, you can immediately see psi and psi bar are 3 by 2 each. And from here d mu a nu, you can see that a mu has dimension 1. Okay. Now you can see that therefore I can also write a term which looks like m gamma squared a mu a mu. So the mass term of this, because this is 3 by 2, 3 by 2, it came out as m. Since this has dimension 1, the mass term of the photon would have come out as m gamma squared a mu a mu. And the fact that it is not there is because we know that the photon is massless. Also it reflects the fact that such a term is not going to be invariant. You can see that if I write a mu prime, I will get a mu, then I will get a times d mu alpha, and then I will get d mu alpha, d mu alpha. So a square term is not invariant under local transformation. So I could not have such a term in the Lagrangian, but I am saved because the electromagnetic field is a massless field. Is this clear? Okay. So we will see that in the case of W and Z bosons, they are massive, and therefore we should have a mass term for those quantities, and that is where all the headache will begin. Yeah, start. Ask. Yeah, ask.
So we are saying that the term m square a mu can't come because it is invariant, right?
It is not invariant. That's what I said. You can immediately see. So it cannot come, right?
Can we write m cube a mu?
You cannot write linear terms in A. See, potentials are not observable. I can't write the A term, right? Because I can then change this by any amount, right?
Why can't we write linear term? The interaction term is linear in A, right?
No, see, what is the interaction term? The interaction term, see, what is Lagrangian is t minus v, right? L is t minus v, right? T minus v. If you want L is t minus v, right? So anything which is not kinetic energy term, which is t, has to be potential. But I cannot write potential of a mu, right? A mu is not some, because it just keeps shifting to whatever it wants, right? It's not a fixed quantity. It's not an observable. I cannot write like that, right? So all those you can simply cancel away and throw away, because it's like the usual notion of potential, right? Whether I measure it from the ground or from a height h, it's only the potential difference which is physically meaningful. So I can always throw away those terms and they are not going to affect you. See, nothing has changed much. The whole ideas in mechanics still work over here. So all those terms, so I can add a constant term to the Lagrangian, but that is not going to be observable. I can add linear terms, but though they are not meaningful or physical, so they are not observable. So quadratic terms are propagators. Anything higher than that are interaction terms. That's all physically meaningful in the Lagrangian. Okay. So
I
the
cannot understand why when we wrote dimension of psi is 3 by 2.
here, this is action. Action is dimensionless. So d4x has mass dimension -4. So Lagrangian density has to have mass dimension +4. So look at this term, psi bar m psi. Mass has mass dimension 1, I mean by definition, right? So psi bar psi must have dimension 3. So psi has dimension 3 by 2. Okay. Similarly, you can see f mu nu. Maybe I'll write f mu nu. Sorry, just give me one more minute. Let me write f mu nu. So I have dA times dA. D mu a nu by d nu a nu, right? So what is the mass dimension of d and d is 1 plus 1 is 2. So a squared has mass dimension 2. So a has mass dimension 1. Okay. So what else is there?
D has a mass dimension.
Sorry?
Why does D has a mass dimension?
It's a derivative, no? What is d? Sorry. d mu is d by dx mu, right?
Okay.
So it has an inverse space dimension or one mass dimension, right?
Okay.
Ah.
And ma'am, you said that propagator is inverse of this gamma mu.
Yes, you can see that always the propagator will come out to be the inverse of the coefficient of the bilinears, okay?
Because
Quadratic terms. Huh?
propagator is a great function.
Yeah, but that is not my job. That is the job of Ravi to tell you how it happens. He will show you how it happens. But essentially this is what you will always get. You will always find that the quadratic term, the inverse of that gives you the propagator, and the cubic, quartic, etc. just gives you the interaction vertices, and that is how the Feynman rules will be written. So this is something called the LSZ mechanism, and you make sure that Ravi doesn't finish his course, because this is the only way that whatever we have said in such an ad hoc way will be given a solid footing in quantum field theory. Okay. So to write those Green's functions, to write the one particle irreducible terms, to do the Wick contraction, and he has to do one LSZ mechanism and show how the scattering cross section comes out from all those pieces, and how the Feynman rules come out from the Lagrangian. Everything is his job. Okay. We are just using it as a starting point, but you see it in many ways, you will begin to understand. So what I did was, I simply wrote it as ad hoc Feynman rule, from you guys already knowing that P goes to P plus Ea by C, right? I use that to motivate electromagnetism, and now I am writing it in the form of a Lagrangian, but it is still the same P goes to P plus Ea by C, okay, nothing new in it. And then I wrote down the Feynman rules by analogy with Fermi golden rule and relativistic quantum mechanics. But and then I just introduced propagator. It just came out nicely in that equation. So it was carefully chosen so that you see the 1 by q squared kind of term, and that came by actually solving the electromagnetic field interaction at that point, if you remember when I did the TFI. But you can have a general notion of a propagator, and since it was important, I talked to you about advanced and retarded Green's functions in electromagnetism, classical electrodynamics, okay. But the whole thing will be put on a proper footing in the field theory course. So all I want you to remember now is that this is the technique. Now the name of the game is to find the covariant derivative for weak interactions. Is it clear? So that will be what we will do in the next class.